Hi, everyone, and happy early Halloween. If you've been reading my Substack, then you know Hannibal Lecter has been the theme for this year's Halloween. I always pick a theme and do those movies for the Halloween spooky season. And like I said, I picked the Hannibal Lecter film franchise as well as the TV show Hannibal. But it stands to reason, where do those films and TV show, where do they rank? What is the system? Which one is better than the other? And there's a lot of debate, especially among the book readers. I haven't read the books, so I'm just going to be focusing on the films and the TV show. So sit back, relax, and welcome to Studio Jake. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome back to the channel. I'm very excited to have you here. So grab your fava beans and let's have a good time talking about Hannibal Lecter. Now, I do want to preface this by saying that I did not add Clarice, the television show from Robert Kirkman, to this list because Hannibal Lecter, while he is mentioned in the show, he is not seen. So that immediately, in my humble opinion, disqualified it from the list. Hannibal Lecter has to at least have some sort of appearance. All right, and without further ado, we are going to dive into how I would rank the Hannibal Lecter films. In other words, my least favorite to the most favorite. And yes, this is very subjective. This is just my opinion. Now, up first, we have the 2007 film Hannibal Rising. It is directed by Peter Weber and based on the novel by Hannibal Lecter creator Thomas Harris, which is the same name, Hannibal Rising. Gaspard Ulliel pulls out a decent performance as the young Hannibal Lecter. This shows his background as being just a child during the end of World War II, being captured by Soviets who proceed to cook his sister. Yep, cannibalism right off the bat. And this sets him on the path of how he would become Hannibal Lecter. It shows him going to college and also his first few kills as Hannibal the Cannibal. Now, like I said, I haven't read the novel, but my main problem with this film and why it ranks so low, despite a really good performance by the cast, is that it is kind of a generic revenge thriller. It's not like the others where they're very psychological and in some cases they're very horror themed. But this one, it kind of relied too much on the action of it and not so much on the suspense or the psychological nature of Hannibal Lecter and what makes him such a compelling antagonist that we want to follow. And that's why I ranked it so low. It was kind of clear to me that they were trying to make Hannibal Lecter more of a heroic character, and I do have a little bit of an issue with that. Up next, we have the 1986 film by Michael Mann, which is Manhunter. Now, this is actually based on the novel Red Dragon by Thomas Harris, and this was sort of the first appearance of Hannibal Lecter, and we see him helping Agent Will Graham, who had previously captured Hannibal Lecter, try to solve the case of the Tooth Fairy or the Red Dragon Killer, depending on your preference in what you would call a serial killer. But all that to say, Francis Dollarhide, who is the Tooth Fairy and the Red Dragon, no one really knows the inspiration for his killer. It's been hinted at a couple. He is very sinister in this film. My main problem with this movie is that Hannibal Lecter, who is played by Brian Cox in this movie, and he does a good job, don't get me wrong, but he's almost like a background character. In later films, when Hannibal Lecter is still sort of helping the FBI capture these other killers, he is very prominent in the background. He's not so here. He barely has, I think he has 3 appearances in it. And also the movie is kind of a product of its time. Like it's really stuck in the 80s. Now the novel takes place in the 80s, but it doesn't have a lot of the timeless qualities that say the film Red Dragon or Silence of the Lamb have. But it is still good. I still enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. Like I said, you can read my review of all these films on my Substack, which is linked in the description of the video. Up next, we have the 2001 Ridley Scott film Hannibal, and this is a sequel to The Silence of the Lamb. It stars Julianne Moore as Clarice Starling, the FBI agent who basically is framed for letting Hannibal Lecter escape, and he has been living a relatively quiet life out in Italy. And here you can kind of see the influences of the Monster of Florence in this film. The Monster of Florence is a real Italian serial killer who many people have been accused of being, and they even had a trial for one suspect, but it never went anywhere. What's interesting about this film is this one definitely tries to delve more into the horror aspect of the film. There is one of Hannibal Lecter's surviving victims who is played by Gary Oldman. Now, this character is not a good person. He is accused of so many horrible, horrendous crimes, but he still wants revenge on Hannibal Lecter for severely disfiguring him and causing a lot of bodily injuries. So this man kind of uses Clarice to find Hannibal Lecter in Italy, and this leads to a capture and subsequent showdown. What makes this one kind of lower than the others for me is Ridley Scott is a fantastic director, and don't get me wrong, this is a very good film, but it didn't have the psychological terms that Red Dragon and Silence of the Lamb had. It was very, very more focused on the horror aspects of it, on just what a sinister, foreboding figure Hannibal Lecter is. And quite frankly, I don't have an issue with them giving us a more evil person to serve as a challenge to Hannibal Lecter. I don't see an issue with that. Now, this movie is based on the novel, like all of the Hannibal films are, and it ends very differently in the novel, and these are some spoilers. In the book, Clarice and Hannibal Lecter kind of fall in love, and she takes him away to South America where they live out the rest of their days. In the film, Hannibal Lecter, he escapes, and it's implied that he's going to continue his killing spree. So I kind of liked the ending to this one a little better. I've got to be honest. Like I said, I haven't read the book. If I read the book, I would change my mind. But from what I've heard about the ending, I'm kind of glad that they concluded this one. So that's why I rank this one where I do. Up next, and I know this is going to be my more controversial opinion, but ranking above Hannibal the movie is Hannibal the TV show. It ran from 2013 to 2015, so a total of 3 seasons. It stars Mads Mikkelsen as the titular Hannibal Lecter and stars Hugh Dancy as Agent Graham. Clarice, as far as I know, does not have an appearance. And I did enjoy it. Now, normally I don't like TV shows that rely way too much on gore and whatnot. That's actually why I stopped watching The Following, starring Kevin Bacon as an FBI agent after a cult of serial killers. It just relied way too much on the gory aspect of it. However, knowing Hannibal is a cannibal, you kind of are expecting that. And Mads Mikkelsen, he does a good performance as Hannibal Lecter. Hugh Dancy is excellent as Will Graham. Now, they did try to do this thing where Will Graham was on the autism spectrum or maybe had Asperger's. I kind of just like it that he has this sort of weird ability to get inside serial killers' heads. They use that in Manhunter and they use that in Red Dragon. I don't really like the idea that we're going to give someone a mental illness just because they have, some sort of ability. And I don't have a problem with people with mental illnesses, no matter how severe, being portrayed in film and TV shows. I just want it to be done tastefully. And while I won't say it was distasteful, I don't think it was very respectful in how they approached the character of Will Graham. Now, that is just my personal opinion on the matter, but I still enjoyed the show, and it didn't adapt the books very well. It took us through a whole bunch of twists and turns, such as trying to figure out who Hannibal Lecter really is. Is he actually the Chesapeake Ripper, which is his moniker before Hannibal the Cannibal? I would have liked to have seen that aspect of it explored a little bit more, him helping Will Graham, but Hannibal gets revealed pretty early on to be who he is, and I think they should have maybe stretched that out a little bit longer and then had it be a big reveal as the season finale, because that is actually what I didn't like about the show. The end really disappointed me. I wanted Will Graham, and these are spoilers, I wanted Will Graham to overcome Hannibal Lecter. I wanted him to look him right in the eye and say, "No, I'm not like you." But the show takes it a different direction where they have like this weird symbiotic relationship, maybe even a romantic one. And I think that is very dumb. I really like Will Graham being a family man who is haunted by Hannibal Lecter and what he does. I like that aspect better than them having this weird symbiosis. And again, that's a personal preference, but just as a fellow writer, that's how I would have done the show and taken it in that direction. I would not have done some of the mistakes. That being said, it is still a thrilling show. It is still excellent, and I would recommend it for horror fans or fans of Hannibal the films. Like I said, we are getting into controversial territory here, and that is number 2 on this list is The Silence of the Lambs. For one thing, Jodie Foster is phenomenal in this 1991 film from director Jonathan Demme, I think is his name. It is phenomenal. Of course, this is our introduction to Hannibal Lecter as Hannibal the Cannibal. We see him manipulate things using his almost sixth sense, and also when he needs to be, he can be sinister and threatening, and it is so full of twists and turns that it keeps you hooked. And this is what I was talking about comparing it to Hannibal, whereas the film Hannibal focused more on the horror aspects. This one is actually like a full-on psychological thriller as Agent Clarice Starling tracks down another serial killer called Buffalo Bill, who was inspired by real-life serial killer Ed Gein. And you follow along and you are just engrossed into this story. Jodie Foster is a phenomenal actress, and she's a pretty good director. I would love to see her direct a Hannibal movie in the future. I know that's probably not going to happen, but I wouldn't mind it. She is a very good director, apart from being an incredibly talented actress, and her sort of weird chemistry with Anthony Hopkins as he plays Hannibal Lecter. Oh man, top notch, top notch. It is fantastic to watch. It is so good, and it does lack something that I'm going to talk about whenever I go to the next one. That's why it's number 2. It just lacks a certain degree. Also, I didn't think it needed to focus so much on Buffalo Bill's skin suit. I know that that's in the novel based on what I've heard about it. And like I said, it is based on Ed Gein, but that scene is just freaking weird and it's a little off-putting, but still, Jodie Foster, what a role. And of course, it's our introduction, like I said, to Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Oh my gosh, blown away. And here we go. I am ranking Red Dragon as my favorite Hannibal Lecter film. Even though it came out after Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal, it serves as a prequel, being released in 2002, directed by Brett Ratner, and it stars Richard Norton as Will Graham, the man who originally caught Hannibal Lecter. Now, in Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal the books, Will Graham is mentioned not frequently, but a lot where you know who he is. He is not mentioned at all in the films ever. They never mention Will Graham as the man who captured Anthony Hopkins, Anthony Hopkins, who captured Hannibal Lecter. Never once. I don't recall it at all. But this film shows it. It connects really well. And what makes it my favorite is this one, again, focuses more on the psychological thriller aspect, but it kind of combines it with the investigation. This time, they are again after the Tooth Fairy or the Red Dragon. This time, he is played by Ralph Fiennes. And really, Fiennes' acting is what puts this above Silence of the Lamb, in my opinion. Ralph Fiennes is just an incredibly talented actor, and he is on par with Richard Norton and Anthony Hopkins, no question. He really brings out the fierce nature of the Red Dragon Killer and really just sends you spine tingling. And like I said, I've given several spoiler warnings, but there is a scene in the film where the Red Dragon is holding Graham's son hostage, and Graham's son has urinated on himself out of fear. Who wouldn't? I would certainly have done that when I was a child if a serial killer was holding me hostage. And Graham begins speaking to Red Dragon how they have learned his father was. Red Dragon's father was very abusive toward him and berated him, would call him the slur that is used for homosexuals over and over again. And so Graham starts speaking to his son that way. And you see Red Dragon go from the sort of smug, I've got your son hostage, to like enraged that he's hearing someone else speak in that manner. And that to me is just a fantastic scene. I just think that it is so well shot. It really shows Richard Norton and Ralph Fiennes' acting skills. And that's really why I personally think it is the best of the Hannibal Lecter films. Go ahead and flame me in the comments. I totally get it, but that is where I stand. If you like that video, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment what you think, and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and check out my posts on the community tab. If you want to see more of what I do or read my reviews of all the Hannibal Lecter stuff, check out my Substack. The link is in the description of the video. It's studiojakemedia.substack.com. Consider joining because different tiers unlock different perks, including being able to pick out the topic for this vidcast or for the Substack. So you get a pretty good deal in my humble opinion. At my Substack, there's a conveniently titled Buy My Books section. You can pick up one or all four of my own books. I'm not saying I'm as good as Thomas Harris, but I hope to be one day. I hope you will grab them. I hope you will enjoy them. And they're all available on Amazon. Leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. One last thing before I go, Studio Jake After Dark returns on Halloween, and I will again be talking about Hannibal Lecter. So head on over there. I think you'll enjoy it. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake, and have a happy Halloween.